This episode of Cell and Gene the podcast is brought to you in partnership with Thermo Fisher Scientific and Applied Biosystems' new QualTrack real-time PCR and digital PCR solutions for biopharma. Give your cell and gene therapy development an edge with reliable and accurate qPCR and dPCR workflows backed by a trusted supplier. Explore the complete ecosystem of CGMP-compliant qPCR and dPCR assays, master mixes, and instruments at thermofisher.com/qPCR/biopharma. Hello, listeners, and welcome to this episode of Cell and Gene the podcast. I'm your host, Erin Harris, and my guests for today's episode are Emily Moran, VP of Vector Manufacturing, and Avi Nandi, VP of Process Development at the Center for Breakthrough Medicines. Emily and Avi, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you.
As we jump into our question set here, because typically on Cell and Gene the podcast, I interview executives from the innovator companies. And so just to our listeners, Emily and Avi will be, providing all the good information that they're going to talk to you about to help innovator companies, biotechs, work with a CDMO, kind of like a best practice type of thing and what you can expect. So just wanted to throw that out there to our listeners too. All right. So given each of your roles at Center for Breakthrough Medicines, how do you and your teams work with biotechs? And so I guess, Avi, I'll start with you from a process development standpoint. How do you and your team work with the biotech? What does that relationship look like?
Sure. So, kind of going along the idea of, not all biotechs are one size fit all. It's really important to understand what the goals of that biotech are, and they can be dramatically different based on the expertise they have, the size they have, and the maturity of their assets. So to take, for example, kind of maybe if we take examples on the opposite side of the spectrum, we've worked with sort of virtual companies, very early startup companies that don't necessarily have, obviously don't have the people to do the massive amount of work, but they may have gaps in their expertise. And so really having those engaging discussions up front for what they're hoping to get out of their partnership with their CDMO. Maybe it's helping guide their process development and analytical development pathway. Maybe it's looking for, maybe they have multiple assets in their pipeline and they really want to make some more key investments up front in a platform so they can facilitate and expedite the development of their assets, over the mid to longer term. And then kind of looking at the other side, we've also had engaging conversations with big pharma companies that have assets at various stages. They have very formal processes and capabilities. And so they may be looking for, some diversity and flexibility in their partnership, for example, to have characterization of certain processes, but have very focused on specific areas to complement their capabilities and maybe, just kind of limit it to very, specific areas so that, we're really adding to what they need for their product development and kind of limiting, certain scopes. And so I think having that upfront conversation for what the client really expects out of it, and then being able to cater our services and products to their needs to then, really ultimately meet their goals and be able to hit their product development milestones. I think, that's ultimately what we're hoping to do, with the different biotechs we work with.
Good. Okay. Emily, I want to make sure we talk, especially from a manufacturing standpoint too. What are your thoughts on how you and your team work with biotechs from a manufacturing standpoint?
Absolutely. So, often, early, and transparently. So we try to create an environment that, again, meets their goals, as Avi mentioned, but really meets what they're looking for in a manufacturing facility, so we can truly be their arm of manufacturing. We don't want it to feel like it's behind a veil, or this is our house and we'll let you know when we make it, but really welcoming them in. And we've designed the suites and the area in such a way that we can accommodate a variety of processes, very flexible, very agile. It has maximum segregation and controls, and is really built to be BLA ready. So when they come to CDM, it's a place that they can come and they can grow in their process. We can accommodate it as it changes and optimizes, and we're there to support it from clinical right through commercial without having to do another tech transfer, any kind of comparability protocols for another area or location, because we've built the suites to really accommodate anything. So many of my team members have been in the industry for a while, specifically cell and gene therapy, and we have a lot of strong individuals, myself included, that have seen the commercial aspects of a program going from clinical to commercial. So we understand what's needed. We have very strong commercial background, so we understand what the regulatory requirements are, and we've designed it in such a way that we never have to go back and make compromises that make the client or CDM, uncomfortable and are in a bad position. And from a transparency perspective, we really do invite our clients to be as involved as they want from the beginning. So introducing them to the team, making sure that our training program is catered to their program, and we've covered any bases. Our goal is always right first time execution, leading with quality and safety. So we built an area that meets that need. We want to build a team that also meets that need. Highly trained individuals that understand what the client's goals are. They understand client confidentiality and the criticality of IP in our industry. So we want that to be something that we lead with. And then from a transparency perspective, we've selected systems, including our quality system, that allows them to be very early collaborators in their documentation and their bill of materials, and how we're qualifying or sampling those materials and that product, and from establishing control limits, from in-process controls to release testing. And then we have the ability to train our clients to come into the floor safely, while also protecting the IP of other programs that we might have. And if that's not something they're comfortable with, our suites are fitted with cameras, so they can view critical parts of their process, either from a window or from the comfort of their location. As Avi said, we do deal with a lot of companies that are virtual and they're small, and we want to make their dollar stretch as far as it can. So if that includes, we're gonna cut some travel budgets. Well, hey, listen, we'll bring you in the suite as we can. This is your home and this is your space, and consider it your team as well. So that's something that's very, very important to us, to really have that practical and transparent relationship from a manufacturing perspective.
Good. Okay. And I want to talk a little bit more about, you've both discussed, so the timing and, the early, use the word early to start, working together, and then the importance of transparency and transparent collaboration. So when it comes to a partnership with a biotech, define early. When do you mean? Like, how early is early?
Sure. I'll take that one. So when we're starting to see proof of concept data that's coming out that indicates that the asset isn't viable or has a high probability of viability, and it's something that the biotech wants to move forward with, that's really early, because that point is where you start to define crucial raw materials for the process and crucial steps for the process. And it's important that we can make sure that from a CMC perspective, that it's viable, that it's something that we can in fact take through to the clinic. So leveraging our expertise from a CDMO perspective and that early step, so that we don't get a process that is great, initial data, but is not something that really would be fit for first in human or even, more advanced toxicology studies, is just going to cause rework in the end. So, very early is really how we kind of define it here at CDM, because we want to make sure that it's successful, all the way through.
Okay. So Navi, maybe I'll ask you about the collaboration aspect of this and the transparent collaboration, because we often use these words, pretty interchangeably, even on cell and gene, collaboration and terms just like that, but they're really, we need to really define them and actually break down what we mean. So when we're talking about transparent collaboration between the biotech and the CDMO, what do you expect from the biotech how are they, what are the ways in which they're doing it really well, and what does collaboration really look like for the biotech?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, we actually kind of label it here partnership, right? And we genuinely look to build partnerships with our with our clients, because we have a singular purpose, right? We want to make sure that their product is delivered to a patient, and we really try to leverage our previous experience for what that collaboration or partnership should look like. And so kind of starting out upfront, making sure we are extremely transparent with our clients. And that means understanding and being clear for what their expectations are and what we can reasonably deliver against. So we're not trying to overpromise and then try to achieve and fall short of some of these lofty goals. We want to be very honest up front and to be like, this is what we believe are reasonable timelines, reasonable expectations, so that as we go through this process, there aren't any surprises, and that we are clear for why we believe these are reasonable timelines to deliver. In addition to that, we want to be transparent upfront with, hey, these are the upcoming deliverables we have. For example, if we have a study coming up in process development, we want to make sure that we have study plans in front of them so they understand what work is specifically being done, what data we're going to be generating, and at what date that's going to be delivered, and then how that impacts the overall timeline. And then through this process, at any point, if the client wants to come on site, if they want to engage with us kind of on a more personal basis, if they want to enter our labs and be able to support or observe any processes, or if we want to be able to send personnel over to their site to get trained, we're really open and flexible with any means to really promote first time right development of their product. Kind of going along with that theme, product development is not a simple task. It's very complex. It touches many different departments. And so, as we scale up their process, as we tech transfer their process, we want them to feel comfortable. And so, access is one of those very important things. So we have, for example, PIP spaces, partner implant spaces, if they want to, stay here for an extended period of time, and have access to scientists. And also, we don't believe in having kind of singular paths for communication. For example, through project management, we want to make sure we build those SME to SME connections, because we believe it helps facilitate the exchange of information and really promote the efficient and effective development of that program. So, if they have their upstream lead, we want to connect them to our upstream lead. We want them to have conversations for the benefit of their program. So all of that kind of ties into what we're calling partnership, and kind of the what you're calling as collaboration here. And we believe if we really set up those core teams in a transparent and integrated manner, that's really going to build the collaboration that we're hoping for.
Good. Okay. I want to switch the conversation a little bit to the topic of de-risking the overall process, which is a big concern for innovator companies. And so, talking about partnership, in what ways does the partnership between the innovator company and the CDMO, how are you able to de-risk the overall process?
Yeah, so what we do is we first start with a knowledge transfer process, right? We want to be able to have the client tell us, hey, this is the products we're developing, this is the patient population that we're treating, and this is the information that we have to date, to both start on the right foot to ensure that we have the right engagement on our side, that the scientists who are touching their product and their process understand the importance of the work they're doing, and really believe that sets a sound foundation for the work. And then going through that process, understanding the overall product development milestones. So what is necessary to make sure that from wherever they're starting, so if it's a great idea, or if they have an initial process, to ultimate GMP runs, that everyone's kind of on the same page. Now we're engaging the right stakeholders. So what does that mean? So upfront, it's understanding what is their process, what are the opportunities to develop it, and what are the critical materials required so we can get ahead of any supply chain challenges that we've faced over the last couple of years, and really starting to build those relationships with vendors. But also understanding that, you know, the process isn't created in isolation, that you have to engage your analytical development colleagues to make sure that you have the right tests in place to then be able to, you know, make informed decisions on process development. So it's engaging those, you know, analytical development scientists, engaging your supply chain. And then as you develop and scale your process, so we also have an integrated pilot operations team that operates at like scale to GMP operations, and that was purpose built to allow for, you know, sort of efficient and cost conscious scale up, and then ultimate training, documentation, and tech transfer over into our GMP space. And so we believe that we can help de-risk product development by having scale up and at scale manufacturing or development runs performed in the PD space, but with the flexibility offered outside of a GMP environment. So if you need to troubleshoot, if you have any engineering challenges, if you want to engage your GMP staff to help train them, if you want to start creating draft documents and start onboarding some of those GMP materials, we have that model and can engage with the client, you know, very actively through that process to help de-risk. And we believe that that's one of our differentiators to help first time right manufacturing for our clients.
Good. Okay. I also want to talk about cost because that's what we're all concerned about. So I'd love for, and maybe Emily, we could start with you.
Mhm.
I'd love to for you guys to describe a situation in which collaboration between both process development and manufacturing has lowered costs. First of all, what are those costs specifically? And then how did this partnership, this transparent partnership, aid that effort?
Sure, absolutely. So there's, you know, multiple different situations, and some of what Avi touched on how we de-risk the process also leads to a lot of different ways that you can be much more cost conscious. So one example that immediately pops to mind is we executed a 200-liter pilot scale run, as Avi mentioned, in our beautiful pilot lab, which is a great place to de-risk and save costs, because one of the biggest reasons that we increase costs is that we lose a batch, right? Instantly, like having to reproduce anything because of an error, especially a human error or a process error that you didn't vet, is a number one way to save some costs. So being able to have that safe space to really exercise the documentation, the process, establish control limits, and, you know, other kinds of key parameters to improve productivity in the pilot space is a really great way. But during this particular run, we used a different technology than we had initially expected to tech transfer. That was just because of the availability of the particular bioreactor, but that really led us to collaborate between our departments at CDM and with the client to say, hey, what does our profile look like when we use this particular unit? You know, the bags might cost a little bit less, or they're available earlier, or we can get a bulk discount because we already have purchased them through a strategic supply agreement. So being able to kind of accept that risk on behalf of the client, run that study, really have a rock solid process that we vetted and feeling an incredible level of confidence in the documents. And then on top of it, kind of having that profile for how the product would react there and establishing those controls was very advantageous. We're also kind of working on executing runs between our departments where we can employ upstream pooling strategies. So pooling larger upstream and having a single downstream train is a very easy way that you can, reduce costs, the overall cost of goods of a batch, but you really want to make sure that you understand what are the parameters, what are the recipes, what are the different methods that we're going to use to make sure that we're capturing the product and the product that we want efficiently. So being able to collaborate on our shared experiences and use our safe space together has been a wonderful way to do that. I think too, identifying different raw materials or different vendors. COVID was a great time to find those smaller startup, filter manufacturers, bag manufacturers, media manufacturers that didn't have those challenging lead times, but also didn't have kind of the street cred that we're used to from some of the bigger companies. But having being able to work with them, being able to vet studies or screening studies to say, listen, we're going to get the same, if not better results, but we need to make sure that, how are you building up your supply chain? And that's a lot of phone calls. That's a lot of footwork. That's just a lot of research and things that we do between our teams to make sure that we're able to identify lower cost of good materials, sometimes even better, raw materials, but it takes a lot of research and accepting that risk, here at CDM on behalf of our client, to just put our best foot forward from a cost perspective has really been helpful. And again, when you're starting to mix and match different technologies that don't always speak to one another, right? Whether that be just how the PLCs interact or just how the sterile connectors exchange and how we follow that product pathway, that's something that we have to start in process development, and in many ways can't be replicated on a piece of paper. So being able to do that together, this is a problem, or we can do this better, or, let's automate this particular high risk step, and being able to do that together, and then getting that information from our process development team as they develop it, so that we can employ that scaled up model from a right first time perspective in manufacturing is invaluable. So I just, I'm grateful every day for the partnership that we have. I'm grateful that we really put an effort on building our systems and our departments together to work in this way. But seeing the results firsthand, and then seeing our clients' reaction to having been able to achieve them has been really a wonderful experience.
Good. Thank you. Okay, so obviously process development and manufacturing are very complex. We could dedicate probably an entire podcast just to those two topics.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm probably going to ask you a very hard question to try to sum up in just a couple minutes. But Avi, I'll start with you. When it comes to process development, what are the top takeaways you would advise, or what you think every biotech, every innovator company should know coming into a partnership with someone like CBM?
Yeah, so I would start with there are, well, as Emily loves to say, it takes a village. There are multiple stakeholders involved in developing a process for any given process, and not underestimating the relationships, the complexity, and the deliverables all of those different stakeholders have to the overall program that we're trying to develop. So, when we talk about making sure our supply chain is engaged up front and understanding, the materials that are required, whether it's our analytical development team engaged, so we understand and that's a very much a two-way street of understanding at what points are we planning to test, at what methods do we need to test with, and making sure that material is available so that they can develop their methods and that they're developed in a fit for purpose manner to support us. Making sure that our manufacturing team is engaged early so that they understand what equipment are we using, what does the process flow look like, and then are there any very specific considerations that are unique to any given process, and having them engaged to be able to train on that process early and often. And the other thing, this is maybe a fraction of that population, but when we start talking about platforms, actually for many of the clients that we work with, there's oftentimes assumptions made that, hey, you can use this one platform and you can kind of just plug and chug with different assets. But interestingly enough, oftentimes they behave a little bit differently, and that can really create different risks as you want to really expedite and get to GMP manufacturing. And so really just understanding what those risks are, see if an development up front can then really mitigate some of those potential hurdles down the line. So I guess maybe that's what I would say.
Okay, so we've reached the formal end of our podcast, and my listeners know that at the end of every podcast, I like to talk to my guests about who they are when they're not in the office of the lab. And so the three of us here are in the greater Philadelphia area. And so my question to both of you, given our geographic location, what are your favorite things to do in the greater Philly area during the summer? Emily, let's start with you.
Easy, Erin. So it's to go down the shore.
Sure.
So I'm a local girl. Spent a lot of time from the area originally. Spent a lot of time in northeastern Pennsylvania, but obviously returned back. Sea Isle City is my home shore destination. So lived there throughout college, and just going there and spending time there is my favorite summer activity with my family. I have my husband of 13 years, and we have twin girls. So we're all beach people. Definitely our favorite thing to do.
I love it. Same. We go to Avalon, so I get it.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
Avi, how about you?
Yeah, so I have not gone to the shore yet over here, but I moved here about a year ago, and I come from New York and then Boston, and so I'm actually tired of the city, or I like to avoid all of the hustle and bustle. So we have a house here, kind of a little bit into the woods, and near a couple of farms. And what I really just enjoy is going out, having peace and quiet, being able to take a nice little walk or run, kind of going to some of the local farms and just kind of trying out whatever it is they're making. And then there are a few little pop-up beer gardens that come around every now and then. So I kind of like that aspect very much in the summer, and just kind of being able to enjoy. Actually, so I was in North Carolina before here, where in the summer, we can get extremely hot. And so, just enjoying a little bit cooler weather, although still a little bit hot, but that's what I really enjoy.
Well, they're both excellent things to do in the summer. I enjoy both, and you can't go wrong either way. But Avi, if you get to go down the shore, as we say, you should definitely give it a shot when you're not in a beer garden and out, in the sort of the more rural points of the greater Philadelphia area. But that's fantastic. You can't go wrong.
Yeah, will do. It's on my list.
Yeah, I'll take them down, Erin, and we can have a follow-up to see if Avalon or Sea Isle,
exactly.
I preferred each one.
Right. Well, yeah, keep me posted. I think again, you kind of can't go wrong, and I love Sea Isle, but I've been going to Avalon all my life, and it's sort of all I know. But right over the bridge, you could walk there actually.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't beat it. Oh, all right, listeners, that wraps up this episode featuring Emily Moran and Avi Nandi from the Center for Breakthrough Medicines. Avi and Emily, thank you so much for your time today. This was a lot of fun.
Yep, thank you.
Be sure to visit cellandgene.com for more editorial and content, and to sign up for our newsletter. We'll talk to you soon.